Hello, it's only me again. I'm doing a video all about my foundation work. I've got 3 books to get through. They're quite chunky books as well, so I imagine this video is going to get quite long. I ended up getting a distinction for all the work I did in my foundation course, which is nice. It's the highest grade you can get. Okay, so this is the first book, and before I get into this, I just want to say the stuff I did in this book wasn't really my cup of tea. Foundation, you do a really wide variety of art, so for the first month or 2 months or so, we were doing a lot of structures like 3D stuff, which was really fun to do because I'd never done it before. As the books progress, the work gets a lot more what I'm interested in, and I think that really shows in the work, and I think the work gets a lot better as it goes along. So stick around to the end of this video because I promise the work does get nicer. First unit we did, mega structures. We had to work in a team. There was 16 of us in our foundation group and we had to work together to create this big sculpture. Everyone got told to bring in just a bunch of rubbish from around the house. We just had to do, I don't know, like little group tasks, and they were all very quick things, and the work produced was nothing to be amazed at. It was just like weird sort of abstract things, drawing continuous lines from the objects. I don't know. Like I say, it was a bit weird, but it was fun. Learned about art history, which was interesting. Lots of writing, some artist research, not very exciting. If you've done A-level art or a foundation, I'm sure this will be quite familiar to you. Usually in like the first lesson, you'll do like a fun sort of thing where it's like stick a pen on the end of a stick and try to draw with it, or it's like draw with your eyes closed, draw with your non-dominant hands, like them sort of tasks. And then we split off into smaller groups and tried to come up with a concept and a sculpture we could make with the items we all brought in. And then this was the final design we came up with, and this is the drawing I did of what the sculpture looked like in my head. There was this whole meaning behind it, but I won't bore you with it. Some progress shots of us making the sculpture, a final picture of it. These don't really do it justice, so I'll pop up some pictures on screen and maybe a little video of what it looked like. Moving on, some close-up pictures of the sculpture. I quite like that one. That's a pretty picture. Oh, this was fun. They put a massive light behind the sculpture, so it projected this big shadow on the wall in front, and then we all had to draw and trace around the shadow, so there was all 16 of us doing this massive drawing on the wall. Oh, we learnt a bit about conceptual art. It's all very odd. We learnt about this artist who was basically like pooing in a tin, and it was just being sold for millions. So yeah, some art can be pretty weird. We got given a piece of paper and an hour to do something with it, and this is what I did. I just drew all over it and cut it up, and that was my conceptual art. From this drawing here, we had to create a cut-out paper sort of thing that would dangle. So inspired by the drawing we did, that's what I did for that. Some more messing about with the drawing that we did, some digital work of the sculpture. Unit number 2, mini structures. And we got to work on our own for this unit, which I liked because I prefer working on my own. Some artist research. Joseph Cornell, he was very famous for these things called shadow boxes, mini sculpture inside a box, and we had to make our own shadow box. Mind maps and ideas for what I could do with the shadow box. Here's a little fact about me. I love theme parks. I'm a bit of a theme park nerd. Love anything to do with theme parks. So from the start, I knew that I wanted to make a little theme park in a box. So I did this big mind map, but deep down I knew that I was going to do the theme park idea. I made another mind map all about the theme parks and ideas for what I could do for the theme park inside the box. Oh, some workshops. You do a lot of workshops in foundation, like just a quick hour-long lesson, sometimes 2 hours, just to learn a new technique that you've never learnt before, which is always fun. Collaging, inspired by an artist called Claire Hillaby. Did these nice collaging. Oh, and included some theme parks in there as well. A couple ideas for what I wanted to do for the box, but this was the final one. Big roller coaster, I've got a Universal sign in the middle. I have a memory box and I've had it since a kid, which I just fill with little trinkets and memories throughout my life, and I knew I wanted to use a lot of the things from that inside this little structure. We had 4 days to make this box. Very fast paced because I had a lot of stuff I wanted to fit into this box. Some progress pictures of making it step by steps. I had to learn how to solder for this box, like solder pieces of metal together, because I needed to make the roller coaster out of wire. God, it was stressful. I ended up with just so many cuts all over my hand from doing it. Close-up pictures of it. I have the box with me, but it's not in its best condition. It's kind of, the Ferris wheel's fallen off and it's not looking its best. So just bear that in mind when you're looking at these clips of it. I really don't know what I'm going to do with it. I think I'm going to take it apart because what am I going to do with that, you know? Here are some nicer pictures of it that we took with the professional camera in the studio. I was so happy with this when I finished it. Another evaluation for that unit. Moving on to the next unit, a mind map. So basically this unit was making a wearable structure, a structure you could wear, but it had to be inspired by architecture. So we had to make a wearable structure inspired by architecture, and we also had to make it out of wallpaper. So it was quite the task. We also worked in small groups. I think we worked in a group of 4. So some artist research. This is the designs that my group came up with. I think I drew this one, these 2 and that one, and then the other ones are what my group came up with. This was the final design that we decided on. Messing about with paper because obviously we were making out of wallpaper, so we were just messing about with it, seeing what we could actually do with it. Fashion illustrations. I really like this one of what we wanted the garment to look like. These are some messier ones. Really messy, but I kind of like the way they look. Progress shots of the garment being made. I made the little arm piece and the leg pieces, and I also made the corset, and then the rest of my team made this giant spiraling thing that went all the way around his body. Quite the challenge because I'd never really sewn before, and also I was sewing with wallpaper. Here was the finished piece. So as you can see, this giant spiral thing, it started at his head and it went all the way around his neck, all the way down his back and around his waist, and then the leg things and the corset and the arm that I made. Spent ages sewing bits of wire into these leg pieces. Oh, this is a bit of a random page. I did a work experience at the Manchester Art Fair and my teacher made me do a page about it, so moving on. Evaluation and then just a little illustration. We didn't have to do this, I just did it for fun because I wanted to draw it. And that's this book. Okay, so this next book is chunky, look at that. Oh, let's pause the video for a second to talk about my Etsy shop. Yes, I've sponsored myself for this video, my rules. If you don't know, I have an Etsy shop where I sell a couple of cute prints. I sell these postcards which you can buy individually or as a set, and then I also just sell bigger prints. I have some square ones, I have some A5 ones, got a bunch of different fruit drawings. I've got some landscapes which I think are really pretty, some peaches. The peaches are a bestseller, people like the peaches. These landscapes, you can buy them as a set or individual as well. And finally, what have I got? I've got this cute little orangutan. Anyway, that is all. You can continue with the video. The next couple units were more up my street. This unit was based around illustration, which was good because that's what I like. So a mind map of a bunch of illustrations that I like the look of. And we were going on a trip to Blackpool. We stayed the night at Blackpool. So this whole project's based around Blackpool. Artist research. I like these 2 guys down here, they're fun. More artist research, another workshop, we're doing some more collaging. I really like these 2, they turned out fun, using pictures, like old retro pictures from Blackpool. Some shells. This was a bit of a random day. We had some student teacher come in and teach us for the day. She just made us draw a bunch of shells, but I really like the way this looked. Did some like looser shells, continuous line drawings, did a more detailed shell down here. We learned how to use Illustrator. I've used Photoshop quite a bit, but doing this was the first time I'd ever used Illustrator, and I just remember getting so frustrated with it. Drew this face from it. I think it turned out alright. We were practicing some, is it called light trails? It's a technique in photography. If you change the shutter speed so it takes a picture really slowly and then you move a light around, it will capture where the light's been and make a line in the picture. So we were practicing about with that because we were going to do it whilst we was at Blackpool. Just got a page full of lots and lots and lots of pictures. I took around 500 pictures whilst I was at Blackpool. They're all just shoved onto this page. Way too many pictures. Here's a little page about the trip to Blackpool. Some of my favourite pictures I took whilst I was there. We also had to do some drawing as well. I think we got maybe 20 minutes to draw this, and then these were like really quick 2-minute sketches. That's probably the best one I drew of Coral Island. Our hands were so cold when we were drawing these. Light trails, like I said before, we were practicing that technique to do this thing whilst we were at Blackpool. I like this one with the roller coaster in the background. With the sparkler, that was fun. We also visited an art gallery whilst at Blackpool, the Grundy Art Gallery, page about that. We had a few classes all about Photoshop, teaching us various things about Photoshop. Oh, this is an absolute mess, this page. I know the basics of Photoshop and I know how to draw on Photoshop, but anything beyond that, it gets a bit confusing. And we were learning about different things in this class and it just didn't turn out very well because I'm not very good with the other aspects of Photoshop, which aren't just drawing. Oh, we had to use this program called Sculptress, which is what you see here, and I hated it. I absolutely hated Sculptress. It's a program you can use to make 3D models, and let's just move past that because that was a horrible time. I hated using it. Concept sketches of different ideas I could do with the pictures I took from Blackpool. I ended up really liking this idea of creating a futuristic Blackpool, and that's what I ended up taking forward for my final piece. We learned how to do heat transfers. If you can paint with an ink on a piece of paper, it's like this special ink, and if you put it in a heat press it will transfer to the fabric. So just some experiments there with the heat press. Collaging to make illustration sort of thing of Blackpool, but using pictures of the comedy carpet. If you don't know, if you've never been to Blackpool, it's like this big giant floor full of quotes and sayings from comedians. Some screen printing, all the workshop on screen printing. I'd never done it before, so they are not the best. I think I put way too much ink on. Now we're moving on to my final piece. I wanted to create a futuristic landscape inspired by Blackpool, but I wanted to do it like how people thought the future would look like in the 50s, so kind of like a retro feel, if that made any sense. So here's a little thumbnail sketch and then a better sketch of it. I ended up drawing it all on Illustrator, which was a challenge because I'd never really used it before, and I was drawing everything by just using shapes and like setting them to different opacities, so it was a very different way to drawing than I'm used to. This is the final piece that I did. I really like the colour palette for it. I think it gives it quite an eerie, moody feel. This is a random page. We had to make a Christmas tree because at my college there's like a Christmas tree competition between all the departments, and we made one inspired by The Nightmare Before Christmas. My evaluation for Unit 4, all the Blackpool stuff, and now I'm moving on to Unit 5, which is all about colour, abstract painting and colour, and I really enjoyed this project. So some artist research. More artist research. Laura Horn, I really liked her work and I ended up doing my piece in the style of her. Colour theory, some colour mixing, messing about with different paints. Texture experiments, we had to just like crumple up tissue paper and paint on top of it. Bunch of different things to make texture and just basically create a mess, that's what we did. Some more workshops, learning about different artists. Meredith Padu. We made these backgrounds by just mashing together a bunch of different paints, and then from that we painted on top of them to create these outlines of shapes. Abstract paintings inspired by Laura Horn. I think these were actually artist copies. I ended up just copying bits of her work to get a better feel for how she paints. Some mock pieces for my final piece. I'll show you the real paintings because these pictures don't really do them justice. I ended up choosing this one to go forward into my final piece. Some progress shots of the painting being made, close-up pictures of it. Oh, and here's a finished piece in real life because this picture doesn't do it justice again. Quite big, I think it's A2. Painted it on a canvas. And that's my evaluation for Unit 5. Oh, this is just a bit of a random page. I painted a self-portrait over the holidays and just added a page in my book because I thought it'd be nice to show it in my book. Moving on to what was called the extended brief. We got given a lot more freedom when we were doing this unit. All the past units, everyone was kind of doing the same thing, but in this unit you could basically do whatever you wanted. We got given a few like words and briefs to help us with the initial ideas, and I ended up choosing texture and pattern. My idea was to create an illustration which included texture and pattern. So a little mind map about that. A big mess of a mind map here. Wow, I had a lot of fun doing this, didn't I? Tons of ideas of things I could do with illustrations, with patterns. Research on Leigh Erikson. I don't know if it's Lee or Leigh. Might be Lee actually. Leigh Erikson. Sorry if I'm saying that wrong. She's one of my favourite artists, I really like her work, so some research on her, and I thought she'd be perfect because she uses quite a lot of pattern in her work. Another artist sang Mio Mio, again I don't know how to say that as well. Another artist which I really like the look of. some patterns and texture experiments. I went out to the park near college and took a bunch of pictures of nature and then turned them into patterns. Some more patterns. This is when I decided what I actually wanted to base my illustration around. At the time of doing this, the bushfires were happening, so we're all over the news. So I thought I'd base my final project around the bushfires. Here's a page just learning all about them. I also learnt about a bunch of different charities which were helping, and I found this charity called Wires Wildlife Rescue. So then I came up with the idea of creating an illustration which would promote the charity. Thumbnails of the koalas in different positions, because I think if you think of koalas, like immediately link it to Australia, so I thought it'd be a good animal to use. These were all inspired by this piece that Leigh Erikson did of this raccoon in the trees. Was copying her piece, and then I did some of my own ideas with different colours. From that I drew a koala in the trees. This was done in watercolour, and then I went on top of it in coloured pencil. And then I had another go with acrylics because I wanted to figure out which media to use for the final piece. I ended up using acrylics because I preferred how you could layer it. And finally coming up with what I would actually put the illustration on and what the illustration was for, and I ended up deciding to make a zine. A zine is basically just like a small magazine with only a couple of pages. Some loose sketches to come up with a koala design, and this is the design for the koala I ended up using. A mock piece of what the zine would look like, and then one done with very rough, done in colour to figure out the colour palette. And here we go, I'm working on the final piece. This is what I filmed for my first ever a week of foundation videos that I did. All the work from now on that you'll see, there are videos on, the whole progress of me making it. If you're interested, I will link the playlist with all them videos in the description. So here's the first illustration before the fire, the koala's all happy. And then second illustration, the fire is starting, koala's all worried, bless his little socks, he's so cute. And then final illustration, the koala in the peak of the fire, but the hands are coming in to rescue it, and it's being taken to a rescue centre, so it's a happy ending for the koala. I then scanned all those illustrations into the computer and joined them together in Photoshop to create one big long illustration. I did text as well and made a little front cover evaluation, and then here's the final piece. I got it printed out nice in the print room, so it's kind of like a book, so you can do that with it, but then it also spreads out to make one big long sheet. I'm really proud of this. I love it. I like how they all just merge into each other. Just did a really simple thing for the back cover, and then there's just some information about the charity. Okay, right. Got the final book now. Okay, so this is now the final major project where you can basically do whatever you want. I'll just read a little bit of this so you get an idea of what I wanted to do. So this is the brief that I made myself. To conclude, I want to illustrate a children's book using a lot of patterns which is set in a magical land with magical creatures. I want the book to tell some form of lesson which will teach children about morals in an exciting way. So that was what I wanted to do. Here's a bunch of children's illustrations that I liked for inspiration. We had to do some questionnaires relating to our brief. Artist research, Teresa Ong, children's illustrator, which I like the look of. I like to decorate the pages of the artist research with drawings that they've done. So this little boy down here is this guy up there. And then another piece of artist research, Vanessa Morales, again decorating the page with one of her drawings. So I drew that in coloured pencil, big fold out flap there of more artist research. Oh, and then we had to do some research using books. The teachers were like, no, to internet, we weren't allowed to use it. Luckily my friend Eleanor had a lot of art books because the library at college had basically nothing to do with what I wanted, so she let me borrow her books. She had one about Steven Universe and all the art behind that, as well as all the art behind the movie Spider-Man Into Spider-Verse, so looking at all the concept sketches for that. Some articles from the internet which related to my brief. I went on a little trip out with my friend Eleanor. We went to Manchester Museum, to an art exhibition, and then to Waterstones to get a bunch of what is called, well, they're called primary photos, which is basically just pictures that you've taken. There's primary photos, which is pictures that you take yourself, and there's secondary photos, which are pictures from the internet. So these are all my primary photos that we took. I then used the pictures I took at the museum because there's a lot of stuffed animals. Because at the beginning I wasn't really sure what characters would be in my book, and originally I thought I would use like either a mouse or a frog as the main character, so I drew a bunch of them, although you'll see in a bit the ideas change. Writing and research from the home art exhibition. This is all the research I did from Waterstones. I tried to copy some of the typography as well. I used secondary pictures, so just pictures I found from the internet. I found a bunch of pictures of fairies and mermaids because like I obviously can't go out and take a picture of a fairy because they don't exist. So I just got pictures off the internet. Did some drawings of them, did this in colour pencil, really like this sketch. Some mermaids, I really like this mermaid here. Some more fantasy creatures, and then, this is when Bean and Bog were made. I drew these little mushroom characters inspired by this little fairy here, and I just thought they would be perfect for a children's book. I then decided to take them further and draw them in a bunch of different positions and scenarios. I gave them names, I called them Bean and Bog, and I thought, oh, that's perfect, that can be the name of the book. Moving on now to media experimentation. So I've now had a general idea of the characters and what the book was going to be about. I needed to figure out what media to do it in. Here's an acrylic painting. This is just some quick digital sketches to figure out a colour palette. Some sketches of environments. I thought it'd be nice and cute if the little mushroom people lived inside mushrooms. Here's some experimentations with watercolour combined with coloured pencil, and I really like the way this looks, and I ended up using watercolour for quite a few of the pages in the book. I did a digital illustration here, but it really didn't turn out the best. I also wanted the book to be interactive and had like pull-out flaps and pop-ups and like little doors that you could open. So here are some ideas of how I could incorporate interactive elements into the book. A little play around with a pop-up element which could have been in the book. Unfortunately, because lockdown happened, all the pop-up ideas got scrapped because I kind of needed a printer if I wanted to do the pop-up ideas, and the printer I have at home is pretty bad, so yeah, all this work got scrapped. Pull tabs and doors which open. Some big pop-up pages. I wanted to do like a really big pop-up page at the end with loads of interactive elements. That dream quickly came to an end when lockdown happened. Oh, this is a random page. We went on a trip to Leeds, University of Leeds, to learn about art history, so that's just a page about that. Oh, some more portraits. I was painting a lot of portraits in my free time, and I included them into my book as well. Felting, as well as having interactive elements, I wanted the book to have like a tactile element as well, because like some children's books have like little fluffy bits you can touch, so I thought felt would be a good way to do that. So I tried this technique where you like roll different felts together to create a little sheet. I also tried needle felting, which is where you just stab felt like thousands of times into this sponge and it like forms into a shape. I thought it'd be cute to make the mushroom hats out of felt, but all of the felt ideas got scrapped again because of lockdown, because I would have needed a printer to make that happen. Bit of collaging there, some more felt experiments. Storyboarding, this is when I finally decided to figure out what's going to be on each page in the actual story, because I had a general idea but I didn't have an actual story. I figured out what was going to happen on every single page. From that I did a quick storyboard with just rough sketches of what each page could look like. Moving on to mock pieces, I decided to give digital work another go. Done digital work in the past and I felt like that mushroom drawing I showed before just really didn't do me justice, and I knew I could do a lot better, so I decided to try again for my mock piece, and I ended up drawing this, which I was really happy with. So that I decided for the final book I would have some pages which would be digital and then some pages which would be done in watercolour and would be traditional. Working on text, trying to find a font which I liked. Then I got this printed out in the print room all nice to get a feel for what the finished book could look like, because I was going to get it printed on this paper. I just had a go at adding the text on with just handwriting to see what it would look like, but I didn't really like the way it looks, so I decided to just do it on the computer. So I did a digital mock piece and I also did a watercolour mock piece. Thumbnails for different ideas for the page, different colours, a little sketch, and then this is the final piece. And this is what the first page of the book is. So my mock piece was just the first page of my book as well. Did this in watercolour and coloured pencil, and I was so proud of this when I finished it. I still love it now. I think it's adorable. I love it. And now all the rest of these pages are just working on the book. This is all in the lockdown now, so we were no longer at college, so all this work from now on is from home. And I was doing quite a lot of work on the computer and I had plans to print it out and stick it in my book, but obviously that couldn't happen. So there's quite a lot of gaps in this book from now on, because obviously I didn't have the chance to print off the pages and stick them in my book. And you can see all of the work for this being done and all the final illustrations in the playlist that I've got linked in the description, where I would film the progress of me making all of this. So quite a lot of these illustrations are digital, so obviously I haven't printed them off to stick them in my books, hence the gaps. Some of them I did do in watercolour though, so I've kept them in the book. I would do thumbnails before drawing the page to figure out the best composition. I would then pick the best thumbnail and draw that neat to create the line work for the piece, which I would then either scan in and draw in Photoshop or trace onto watercolour paper and paint it there. And here's my final piece that I made from all of that. I didn't actually have to do this because the foundation course finished quite a bit before I had finished the book, but because I'd already invested so much time into the project and the book, I really wanted to get it finished anyway, so I kind of just did it for myself. I ended up getting this book made got it done by Photobox, and they did a pretty good job. So I'll have a flip through. I've made a video showing this book more in depth and like actually reading it. If you're interested, I'll also link that in the description. I won't read it for you, but I'll do a quick flip through. Basically, the idea behind the book is these two brother and sister little mushroom people get lost in the forest, and it's about them trying to find their way home. And along the way, they bump into different creatures and eventually do make their way back home. And it's teaching the lesson of don't run away from home, or don't stray too far because you could get lost. Basically, that's the lesson behind the book. This is my favourite illustration in the whole book. I love it so much. If I was to do this book again, because this obviously was the first book I've ever made, I would leave a bigger gap in the inner corners of the illustration because I completely forgot that like the margin is a thing, and it kind of hides some of the illustration in the gaps, so it doesn't really line up anymore. Some of the illustrations it's like cut off the top or the bottom. But for a first attempt, I think I did a very good job. I'm so pleased with this little book. Oh, here we go, they eventually get saved by this giant tree man who helps them find their way back home to their village. So it's a happy ending. Did this cute little repeat pattern thing for the inner covers. Being a Bog, written and illustrated by Emily Schofield. And then that's just the back of the book. So there you go, that's all the work I did in foundation. Hopefully this video was a nice break from pets, because I know the past 3 videos have all been about pet portraits. If you don't know, I've been doing commission pet portraits and it's kind of taken over my life. But I've only got one left to do and then I'm finished. So hopefully next week's video will be... I quite like to paint some landscapes, so I might do that for next week's video. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. I hope to see you soon. Goodbye.